Anyone who has ever booted up a WarioWare game will know these titles are insane. They're hilarious and ridiculous in a way only the Japanese can pull off, but of course they're mostly meant to be played as either multiplayer party games or single player high score beaters. But what both of these audiences then tend to overlook is the story element of these games. Sure, it isn't much, but what is there is completely unfiltered ridiculousness, and I think it's deserving of the spotlight once in a while. Allow me to take you on a journey past the bonkers stories of the WarioWare games. We begin with the original one, back when the series was still supposed to be titled WarioWare Inc. Mega Microgames sets up the origin story of how Wario came to found his microgame company, which would end up becoming the narrative pillar of the series. What you may not realize though is that the inspiration for him to do this is the grand success of another game called Pyoro, starring the little red bird. He rushes to get himself a computer as a development tool and renovates his entire house to become the company's headquarters, before calling his friends. Say what you want about Wario, but the man doesn't take half measures. This is the point where, presumably, all the other characters come in and contribute microgames based on their lives and passions. For this game, most of them are still fairly straightforward and used to set up the characters. I mean, literally all Jimmy T does in his story is go to a club and get phone messages, like bro, you're not special. The only one who really got the assignment was Mona, whose microgames revolve around her getting chased by the police while trying to make it in time for work. With the help of her animal friends, Elephant, Pig and Chimp, who all look like your average sleep paralysis demon, she manages to evade 5-0 and make it to her work in time. All these microgames turn WarioWare Inc. into a huge success and earn the company a ton of money, which Wario refuses to share with his employees. Can't be a modern gaming company without a scandal or two, am I right? He flees on a rocket, which he has also built in his house during the renovations, but crashes into Dr. Krygor, causing all the money to fall down into the sea while his friends watch on. And while you would think this will be the end of some of these friendships, Wario's buddies are a forgiving bunch. That said, the company doesn't make a confirmed return for the game's sequel, WarioWare Twisted, which is again set up for Wario chilling on his couch, this time playing his Gameboy Advance. He has a certified gamer moment and nearly destroys his system in frustration, prompting him to seek out Dr. Krygor to help fix it. He has just completed his invention, the Gravitator, which they toss the GBA into, causing it to be able to be controlled through rotation, which Wario sees as a great financial opportunity. Yeah, sure. No one would be dumb enough to buy a game that requires you to rotate your GBA around. How exactly the other characters' stories tie in is not exactly explained, but for all we know, Wario is creating them from memory because all individual stories in this game are incredibly reminiscent of the first game. There are different twists and turns of course, but in general they're largely the same. Mona gets chased again, Cat and Anna fight enemies, Orbulon has UFO problems, etc. What is worth mentioning though is the random prominence Club Sugar is given in this game. This is a club that Jimmy T regularly visits, as seen in Mega Microgames and again in Twisted, but every individual story also ends with the characters going to the club. By the end of the game, they have all met up together, but it doesn't really go anywhere, making this one of the few WarioWare titles without a proper ending. I guess Wario Man's stage is supposed to be that, but doesn't really provide an end to the setup. WarioWare Touched similarly features no overarching story, or even an in-game explanation why the microgames even exist. However, it is implied that Wario once again got everyone on board after taking a Nintendo DS from a sewer guru and realizing the profit potential of 2 screens. Is this Nintendo slyly telling us how they came up with the Nintendo DS? Miyamoto dropping his GBA on a pothole and getting it cracked in such a way it now has 2 screens? I reached out to Nintendo for comment, but I'm currently awaiting a reply. When we take a look at the individual stories of the characters in this game, one thing that pops out is a large amount of new characters introduced in this game. You've got Dr. Payne, Wario's dentist, a pest bothering Jimmy T called Scratchy the Throwbug, news reporter Rocky, main characters Ashley, Red and Mike, Cat and Anna's dog Shadow, who is now apparently getting his own movie, and a whole slew of new faces in Mona's story. Meet Vanessa, Garbage Boy, Art, Deco, 4.1 and 4.2, and get ready to not see the most of them ever again. I also want to give a shout out to Numchuck the Monkey from Cat and Anna story and point out what a missed opportunity it is that this guy doesn't appear in the next game in the series, which is Smooth Moves on the Nintendo Wii. This is the first game in the series to not even hint at the WarioWare company as a video game producer, and the plot of the game doesn't even revolve around profits whatsoever. Instead, it is about a special artifact known as the Form Baton, which Wario steals from a temple belonging to a weird race of alien dudes called Splunks. How exactly the Form Baton ends up involved with the other characters' individual stories is unknown, but it somehow does, and I'd say this is where the series truly starts getting wild with these. Highlights include Mona's cheerleading arc, revealing a guy named Boy has a crush on her, Jimmy T dancing with a group of stray cats, and the interconnected storyline of Penny designing a pink bike for Wario, which is then gifted to him in Tiny Wario stage. I want to give a special shout out to 9V story though, which revolves around him getting into an argument with 18V and tearing his Game & Watch in half. Separately, both go on the hunt for a new one, and encounter a shopkeeper designed to resemble late Nintendo president Satoru Iwata, who just so happens to have them in stock. Interestingly enough, this is not the only time Iwata appears in the WarioWare games, as he also has a very brief cameo as a show on Wario's TV and Mega Microgames. The next games in the series, Snapped and DIY, would be a bit smaller titles, featuring less characters and thus story. Snapped sees Wario enter the theme park business. I'm telling you, this guy is a stand-in for Miyamoto, which he calls Wario Park, and where Mona, Jimmy T, Cat and Anna work as employees, thus explaining why they, and only they, appear in the game. Each character operates their own roller coaster, and that's honestly kinda as far as the contents of the game goes. In DIY, most of Wario's friends leave his company behind to join the big money conglomerate that is Diamond Gaming, which sounds more like a YouTube channel than a company if you ask me, but still. It forces Wario to hire you, and me, and everyone else who bought the game to make microgames for him using Dr. Krygor's latest invention, the Super Maker Matic 21. While this is it again as far as stories go, it also illustrates something I've really admired about the WarioWare series. Special care is always put in to make the game's features part of the world, even when it really isn't necessary. It could so easily have this all just be menus, but no, it has to be part of the in-game universe. It's completely unnecessary, but I've always found it admirable. And the reason I'm saying this right now is because the next title, DIY Showcase on WiiWare, doesn't do this at all. It's mostly meant to be used as a way to bring the microgames you made on the DS to the big screen, but it also features 4 pre-packed stages, consisting of some of the game's most iconic characters like Wario Man and 18V. What a bizarre game to give 18V his first starring role, but I guess I should just be happy it happened at least. That said, the little stories in this game are so incredibly basic that it's honestly not even worth mentioning them, so I suggest we move on to the Wii U, which received only one WarioWare game, which was also a sort of weird spin-off, now featuring larger minigames as opposed to microgames. Weird how this is never brought up as the reason the Wii U flopped, even though it's clearly the cause. The story setup of this game honestly borders on a reboot, as it is remarkably similar to Mega Microgames. Wario's chilling on the couch, sees the Wii U on TV, and realizes he can make big bucks from video games for it. A subtle hint at the fact this game is set in an alternate universe where the Wii U didn't bomb. His friends are even so excited for the unlimited possibility of a gamepad that they too want to create games for it. And so, WarioWare, the company, is reborn. While the game may throw the entire formula of the game on its head, the little story beats that set up the minigame mayhem finally return. So let's put the focus on some highlights. Jimmy T is finally freed from the nightlife and this time has a minigame revolving around skiing. 9V, the big Nintendo fan he is, turns the Super Smash Bros. Stage into a minigame with the well-known gamer. Wario comes across a costume shop where he spots a pirate suit and decides then and there to dedicate his life to the oceans. And here I was thinking Nintendo didn't like piracy. This game specifically, Pirates, is what causes Wario's company to bring in the big bucks, pushing the story towards its bizarre conclusion. Because Wario is presenting his hit game in his pirate costume, his crazed fans think he's the game's villain and attack him. This sends him flying through the roof and eventually landing in the aforementioned Club Sugar, where all his friends are dancing. Wario then suggests they go bowling, and the game ends, but not before unlocking the bowling minigame. There's a lesson here. I just don't know what. It took until the dying end of the 3DS's life, but next we finally got a traditional, classic WarioWare title again, in the form of Gold, one of the best in the series if you ask me. And that is not completely unrelated to the fact this game ups the narrative and presentation tenfold. The story this time revolves around Wario setting up a gaming competition, which his friends help to organize, but not before he has stolen a golden pot from the village of Luxville. One of the town's residents, Lulu, is not too thrilled about this, and throughout the game is regularly playable in her quest to defeat Wario and take the pot back. Meanwhile, we as players compete in Wario's gaming competition, and eventually win. But when we come to claim the prize, we find out what it feels like to be Wario's friend. We get big fat nothing. Instead, Wario puts the pot on his head and transforms into a form known as Wario Deluxe, effectively becoming the game's final boss. One of the coolest details of this stage is that after you've come a bit too close to defeating him, Wario will confuse you by hiding what control scheme you're supposed to use for the next microgame, with Lulu suddenly appearing to fight Wario and stop his cheating. The boss fight ends with the twist of a lifetime. The golden pot is used in Luxville as a toilet. Suddenly, Wario doesn't want it anymore and gives it back, only for Lulu to also end with wasted time, as it is revealed Luxville recently installed a modern toilet. What a narrative. The individual character stories in this game are also all great fun, so much so that I find it hard to even pick highlights. They're all delightfully bizarre. You've got an 18-volt rap battle, Mona calling Wario a fashion icon, Krygor being reunited with a robot he abandoned, and 5-volt getting ripped. What more do you want? The Nintendo Switch received another 2 entries, Get It Together and Move It. These titles approach their stories in pretty different ways, with Get It Together going for a surprisingly grand main story but barely anything individually, while Move It has a clear shared theme but instead focuses a lot on individual stories. In Get It Together, the WarioWare company is once again up and running like never before, but after Wario has another gamer moment, the familiar cast ends up getting sucked into his console. In the game, they all have special powers, which they must use to complete levels and save their friends, eventually culminating in a showdown with the Supreme Developer, a godly Wario figure, who brought them into the game to fix the bugs that Wario negligently left unfixed. While this may sound like a big knock to my Wario's Miyamoto theory, I would like to remind you Nintendo games are almost always low on bugs. And until evidence comes up that proves this isn't done by sending Miyamoto into the games directly, I see no reason to change my views. Anyway, the WarioWare employees realize 3 of their staff are still stuck in the game, so they return to freedom from the towers they are held in. They also come across pieces of treasures here, which, with the help of Penny, they combine into a golden watering can, leading them towards a showdown with the great evil behind it all, Pyotto. Nintendo hated the leak so much they proactively made him a villain. In-universe, Pyotto is a successful video game character who jumped from his title to Wario's to cause havoc for funsies. And after such an intense adventure, I'd say it's pretty deserved for the WarioWare employees to take up some vacation days, which they use for a trip to Caresaway Island in Move It. Like I already mentioned, this game lacks a true overarching story, and instead focuses on each character's adventures while on the island. For Mona, that means searching for a mermaid. Krygor, Penny and Mike travel back in time and break every single paradox time travel always warns you about. Orbulon becomes a deity to the island's locals, and young Cricket and Master Mantis duke it out with a group of penguin warriors. Their leader is later revealed to be Cicada, a character originating from the Rhythm Heaven series. Wario's story is reminiscent of Smooth Moves, which the localization team didn't realize Move It is a sequel of, and then he goes on wild hijinks through an ancient temple, accompanied by the Form Stones. Later, when he attempts to steal the temple's treasures, he is somehow absorbed by the volcano it was built on, and becomes one with it, threatening the safety of the island. The only way to calm down a volcano is to dance, which indeed lifts the curse and frees Wario. He ends up summarizing the whole experience as the worst vacation ever. And honestly, I agree. Not a fan of this game at all. But my opinion on these titles is for another day. If you enjoyed this little trip across the game's thrilling narratives, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel to stay updated on all my future Mario, but also Wario content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.